Hey, this is Henry, and what we're going to be doing today is building a simple to-do list with the PERN stack. Now, the PERN stack, if you don't know what it is Postgres, Express, ReactJS as the front end, and node.js as our backend language. So by the end of this video, you'll have a basic understanding of how to use the PERN stack and just kind of go on to building better or more complex application than just a simple to-do list. Okay? So I'm just going to give you guys a quick demo of how this is going to work so you have a bigger overview of what's going on. So if I were to enter a to-do like I need to clean my room, which I really need to do, I can even edit the data. So in this case, I can say car. And finally, I can delete it. So really what this really is just a CRUD application. And even though it is trivial, there's a lot of things that's going on with the back end, and especially a lot of things that's going in the front end. So this is really what we're going to be building for today in the next few sections. Now there is going to be some prerequisites, not too much. Really all I need you to do is already have Node.js already pre-downloaded. I'm also not going to go over the download of PostgreSQL. So I'm going to link a video that's really good at showing you the process of installing it, which is going to be this video. And otherwise from there, you just need to have a basic understanding of JavaScript, and maybe a little bit of RESTful APIs could help you a little bit more. But otherwise, I'll just go through the whole entire process with you guys so you can have a understanding of how the PERN stack is going to work as a whole. Okay, so I'll see you in the next section, and we'll just work on some overview diagrams. All right, so let's just quickly go over this diagram to just get the big picture. So I'm not going to go really too in depth with each one. I did make a video about Postgres RESTful APIs, so if you want to watch that and have a more full in depth of how RESTful APIs works, then I highly recommend you watch it. But otherwise, I'll just give you guys a brief idea of how everything functions. Essentially, this is our front end that's created by ReactJS. Looks exactly like the demo I just showed you. And then anytime you click a submit, edit, or delete button, it is going to send an HTTP request to our RESTful API. And then our RESTful API is going to instruct our database of what type of CRUD operation needs to get done. So what I mean by CRUD is create, read, update, and delete. So those are the four basic ways a database can actually manipulate data, or what they can do with data, essentially. So if you're still a little bit confused of how RESTful APIs work, I'm just going to oversimplify the definition. But essentially, a RESTful API is using transfer protocols to do CRUD operations. That's really all it is. And in our case, our transfer protocol is HTTP request, and that's going to be post, put, delete, and get. So if I'm sending a post request, it means I want to create data. If I'm sending put, I want to update data. When I want to do delete. When I want to get, I just simply want to read data. So the big misconception that a lot of people have is that CRUD operations occur within the RESTful API. That is not true at all. Instead, the CRUD operation is only occurring within the database. The purpose of the RESTful API is to take those HTTP requests and then instruct the database of what type of CRUD operation needs to get done. Okay, so now that you kind of have a better understanding of how this is all going to work, we're just going to start jumping into building our RESTful API quickly. Okay, so I'll see you in the next section. Alrighty, so let's start building this application. So the first thing I did was created a folder called PERN to-do list. You can name this whatever you want, but the big picture is that this is going to be holding our client and server folder. So I'm going to do mkdir server, and I'm going to cd into that server, and I'm going to immediately run npm init. npm init essentially just keeps track of all the packages and has a little bit of information of your application. Okay, and next what I'm going to do is I'm going to install some packages. So I'm going to install Express, PG, and Cores. So Express is a way for us to create server in Node.js. PG is a way for us to integrate or to interact with our Postgres database by using the Postgres queries. And then we're going to be using Cores for different domain applications to interact with each other. Okay, so that's just the big picture. Next, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do touch index.js. So I'm going to create a file, and you can look inside here that this is what I'm doing. And this is going to be the glue of our server code. And I'm going to move inside here, and I need to require the libraries that I just downloaded. So the way that we create a server is we're going to do const express. So we got to require that library. And then I'm going to create a variable called app, which is going to take that express library. It's going to run it. So now app has all the methods to create a server. So what I could do is I could do app.listen. So I have to first listen to a port number in order for this thing to run. And then I have to do console.log. Server is starting on port 5000. Okay, and I think this is a good time to also create some middleware as well. Okay, so remember how we created that course library, or we downloaded and installed it? So we're just going to do the same process of express. We're going to require it. And then it's as simple as doing this, app.use. So anytime you're using a middleware, you have to use app.use. And then I'm just going to run cores. So that's going to allow our local 5000 and local 3000 applications to interact with each other. Okay, so let's just kind of test this thing out. I'm just going to run node index. So you could totally do this, and it's working, but I highly suggest that you npm install globally nodemon. It essentially allows you to keep working your application without turning on and off your terminal to see the changes. So I'm just going to get out of here. I'm just going to do nodemon index, and now it's going to watch this index file for any changes and instantly restart for me. Okay, so let's just see. Yeah, so it's working now. Okay, and I think the last, also what I need to do is have that request.body given access to us. So I'm going to do app.use express.json. So essentially what this is that it allows us to access the request.body. Okay, so anytime we're getting data from the client side, the only way for us to access that data is with the request.body. And then we can get JSON data as well. Okay, so we got our basic server up. I think it's a good time to kind of jump into creating our database along with our table. So what I want you to do next is create a file called database.sql. You can name this whatever you want, but essentially this is going to make it a little bit easier for us to see how our SQL is going to be structured as. So if you look inside here, so let me see if I can open this thing up right here. Oh, I should X that out. So let me just open this thing up again. Okay. So I'm just going to open my Windows right here. And I am going to open my PSQL terminal. So you should have already installed this, but what I'm going to do is PSQL-U, which stands for user, and then I'm going to put in Postgres. And essentially Postgres is a super admin, meaning that it has access to everything inside this Postgres database. So that's my user. And then remember how when you installed it, you have to put in a password. So you put this password inside here. All right. Okay, so I'm inside my database now. So if you want to see all your database, you do /l, and then you can see everything that you're working with. And then after that, you can actually move into a database by simply doing /c, and let's see which one I want to do. Let's simply do API in this case. Okay, so that's how you see all of your database, and that's how you're able to go inside a database. Okay, so I'm just going to get out of this really quick, but essentially what we're going to do is that we want to create a database for our application to run on. So the commands I'm going to do is create database, and then I'm going to name it PERN stack. Okay? So this is all it really takes to create a database. So now I can actually take this command right here, and then I can put it inside here. You'll see that it's going to create a database for me. So now I can do that same exact stuff where I do /l. I can see all my database, and I think it should be right there. And now I can finally do /c into PERN stack. All right, so I'm inside the database, and as you can see, if I do /dt, which means like it wants to see the relationships, I have nothing. it means I have no table inside this database yet. So that's what we're going to create next. So then I'm going to do create table, and what I'm going to name this table is to do. So this is going to keep track of all our to-dos. Now the thing is that I can't just simply say create table to do. I actually need to define a schema of what this to do is going to look like, because you don't want to put any type of random data inside your database. So I'm going to use parentheses. I'm going to open it up. And also don't forget your semicolons. It's extremely important. Okay, so now that I'm inside here, I am going to first define a unique ID for this to do. And then after that, I want to define a description. So I'm going to do to-do.id or to-do_id. You don't have to name it like this. Some people like to just simply do TID. But in this case, I want to be a lot more specific in what I'm trying to do. And then what I'm going to do next is say serial primary key. So what is this? Essentially, this is going to it's going to identify this specific to-do that I'm going to be working with. Because we're going to be having a lot of to-dos in our to-do list, so we want to be sure that we make each one unique so we can identify them. And then you'll see that the serial here is just going to increment this primary key for every new to-do that's going to be added. If that doesn't make sense quite yet, that's perfectly okay, because you're going to see it coming up pretty soon. Then next, we want to have our to-do to have some description. Okay? And then I'm going to say varchar 255. And what this really means is that I want to have a max of 255 characters for this to-do description. And that's all it really takes. So I can take this data right here, and I could just put it inside here. You see that we created a table, and if we do /dt, you'll see that we have our to-dos right there. And you don't need to know this command, but I'm going to just do select all from to-dos table. And you can see that we have our structure over here. So pretty neat. All right. So since we got that thing set up, we have a database with a table, we have a server that's running. I think the next thing we should do is connect our database with our server. So I'm going to create a new file that's going to be called db.js. And this is what's going to help us connect everything together. So remember how we created or we installed that PG library? So we're going to use it here. So I'm going to say const pool uppercase, and then I'm going to say require PG, and then I'm going to say pool. So this is going to allow us to instance this pool, and then we can configure it of where and how we're going to connect to that database. So now I can say const pool, and then I can say new pool. So if you ever worked with Mongoose, this looks kind of familiar. It's a little different because what we're just doing is configuring where this database is located at. So I need to first define my user, which in this case is going to be Postgres, because that's my super user over there. It doesn't have to be. Remember, you can actually create users inside Postgres, but I'll link you guys to another video that goes to more advanced Postgres. And then we're going to do password, which in my case is KTHL8822. So whatever you set your password in when you installed it. And then the next one is I need to define where my database is located at. In this case, it's going to be PERN stack. That's what I named it as. And then we want to be able to do port. So naturally, Postgres runs on port 5432. Okay. And I know I'm forgetting something, and I just can't think about it right now. There is something extra that I should be adding inside here. So we got users, we got passwords, we have database, we have ports. And I think also I need to connect. Oh, yes. And then we need to know what our host is going to be, and it's going to be localhost. Sometimes I just forget to put that inside there. Okay? And this is really all we need to do to set this thing up. So I can just do module.exports, and then I could just say pull. Okay? So this is really all we need to do to configure our database with our server, and this is what we're going to be using in order to run our queries. All right, so I'm going to go to my index.js, and I'm going to require that thing. So pool equals to require /db. Right. Well, that's strange. Oh, it's because I put everything outside. Snakes. Okay. Put that inside there really quick. right. So since that thing's all set up for us, now I can do /db. Okay. And now this has all the access we need to run some of our queries. So next, I'm going to make a comment where we're going to put in our routes. And I'm going to split the routes into 5 parts. The first one is we want to get all to-dos. Okay? And then we want to get a to-do. Next, we want to create a to-do, update a to-do, and then we want to delete a to-do. Okay, and it's not going to be too bad. We're just going to work on each one of them. So we can't really get a to-do or even a to-do if we don't create a to-do. So that's going to be our first one that we're going to be working with. So I'm going to make this an app.post. The reason is because I want to add data. So I'm going to say /todos, and then I'm going to do request.res. So we got this simple route set up, and then I'm going to be using async. And async essentially is a way for us to make asynchronous requests, and it gives us these really cool tools like try, catch, and await that makes it good for us to kind of organize our code. And also keep in mind that sometimes when we're actually going to get data from our database, it takes some time. So that's kind of where the await keyword comes in. But anyway, try catch. So big idea is that it's going to run all my code inside here, and anytime it finds the error, it's going to catch it and it's going to throw it. So I'm going to do console.error, error.message. And then inside my try, this is kind of where we are going to start using the queries. So also I want to give you guys a heads up that I am going to be using Postman. And Postman is a great way for us to test our RESTful APIs quickly, because it has all these provided tools of all the HTTP requests that we're going to be using and to specify the URL. So I'll just wait for this thing to just load. But at least I can actually get you guys set up for how we're going to get the data from the client side. So remember how I said you have to do app.use express.json, and this gives us access to request.body. So that is something that we are going to need to get. So I'll just console.log, or even better, I think I'll just do rest.json request.body. Okay? And when this thing gets up, we'll start doing that. Let me just X that out. Okay, so I think immediately the first thing you're going to see about this Postman stuff is that it provides us all these routes that we can do, which is quite neat. And also we can specify the URL. So in this case, we are wanting to make a post request right here because we're creating data. And now we're going to hit /todos. And then we can also specify the body. So in this case, I got something already set up. So I'm going to just click enter right here. Oh, and I guess because you guys are probably new to Postman, maybe, to get to here, you have to go click on body, raw, and then you have to specify you want to work with JSON data. Okay? And I guess I should start this from scratch, but essentially description is what we're going to be using. And then I'm going to say need to wash dishes. So now if I click enter, I should be getting this data back. Okay, so we got a status of 200. That's a good sign. And this is the data we get back. Cool. And we need to access this description so we can put it inside our database. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to destructure. I'm going to say const description, since that's what I need. And then I'm going to set that equal to request.body. So nice. And then next we are going to do const new to do. And what I'm going to do next is say await pull that query. So this is the library, or not the library, but this is what we created. Pull that query. And now we're ready to set some queries for this Postgres. So in order to create new data, we have to use the insert into command. So insert into, because we're adding data, and then we have to specify which table we want to insert data into, which in this case is going to be to do. So in case you did forget, if we look in our database, you can see that we have a to do table. So insert into to do, and then we have to specify what type of column we want to add. So in this case, we just have simply description. And then we also have to specify the values. Now this is going to look a little bit strange, But what we're going to put inside here is a $sign and 1. And essentially this is going to be a variable. And we need to first define what this variable is going to equal to. So that's just where the second argument comes in. So we're going to put inside here description. This description is coming from the request.body, but essentially this description is going to define what the value is going to equal to for this column. So let me first do all of this, and then I'll just explain it again of what's happening. So let me just spit this one out first. Okay, so currently right now, if you look inside, we have nothing inside our database. But now if I click enter, okay, so we look into the bottom, you can see it indeed that we actually have a data that's been inserted. Actually, no, I don't even see a data that's being inserted. It's strange. Okay, so I got my description, insert into to-do description. See if I named this correctly. With values of $1. Okay, well, let's check inside our database to see if we got any data. Oh, okay. Well, it didn't seem to show it over there, but essentially we did get our data over here. So need to wash dishes. And I just totally forgot the reason why we're not getting data. So I guess this is actually perfect. So as you can see, when we're adding data, we don't get the data back. In order to get that data, we actually need to use returning star. Right, I keep forgetting to do this sometimes, but this is going to give us back our data. So if I were to click enter again, you can see that we get our data right here. So neat. And we made a duplicate of data right there, but that shouldn't be a problem because we're going to display all of it. Okay, so as you can see here, we're inserting into this table. We want to actually add values to the description column, and the value is going to be $1, which essentially is going to represent this first value of our array, which is description. And we have to use returning star to get back the data. All right. Okay, so that looks pretty stable for us. So let's kind of move on to our next route, which is going to get all to-dos. Okay. Oh, and also you can notice that we're actually getting a lot of data from here. So I guess a good way we can actually start doing is getting new to-dos. We just want to simply access the rows property right here. And we want to get only the first value because we're only adding one to-do. So we're just going to display this thing right here. So I guess I should change this up a little bit. So how about I say I need to wash my car. And if I click enter, you can see that this is a lot more readable for us. Okay, so we're going to keep it that way. So let's get all our to-dos, which is pretty easy. All we have to do is app.get. And then we're going to say /todos because we want to get all the to-dos, async, request.res. You can see this is kind of my convention of coding. Console.error, error.message. And then let's start getting all the to-dos. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to set a variable called const all to-dos. And then I'm going to say await pool.query. So remember how in my database I kept using select, like I used this command a lot just to see all my database? Essentially, this is what we're going to be doing inside here as well. So I'm going to say select all from to-do. And then what I can do is that I can console.log or res.json all to-do. And then I'm going to get the rows. So as you can already tell, all the data is going to be within this rows property right here. So I am going to get all the data right here. And I'm going to display it. And you can see right here is that we get all our to-dos that we just created. So that's pretty neat. So all we had to do was select star from to-dos. And the reason we didn't need this returning star is because naturally select is going to give us data. All right. Oh, excuse my coughing, by the way. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is that we want to get a specific to-do. And it's not going to be much different from this one because we're going to be introducing a new clause. So what I'm going to be doing is app.get. I'm going to do /todos. And then also I'm going to specify a params. So this is going to be ID. And essentially the big idea with it, and I think it's best if I show you with an example. So if I console.log request.params, you'll see what I mean. So if I actually decide to add a random stuff over here like hello, and I click enter, you can see that hello pops inside there with the ID that's been specified right there. If I called this ID hashtag, for example, and I save that and I clicked enter here, you'll see that it's going to have hashtag ID. Oh, I guess I can't really do hashtag. Okay, let me just add an extra D then, if that's the case. Okay, so you'll see this says IDD. So this is what we need to access to be specific on what type of to-do we want. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of this. I'm going to make sure to get rid of that D. And let's start this. So I'm going to do try catch error console.error error.message. Okay, so the regular process. And now what I'm going to do is const to do equals to, it's going to equal to await because it takes some time, pull that query. And then I'm going to say select all. So it looks very similar from the first one, select all from to do, but now we have something that's called the where clause. And the where clause specifies what exactly we want to change. So I'm going to open this database again, but in this case, we want to find a to-do list that equals to whatever we specify. So what I'm going to do is column or where to-do ID equals to $1. So remember, again, that this is a variable, and we have to specify it right here. So in this case, I need to access that params. So I'm going to destructure that. So I'm going to say ID equals to request.params, right? And now I'm going to put it inside here. So if I were to specify /todos ones, I'm basically wanting to get the to-do with the to-do ID of ID 1. Okay, so I can even put this logic right here. If I said select all from to-do where to-do ID equals to 1, you can see that I get the first item. And likewise, I can say 2 and get the second item as well. All right, so pretty simple. And now we're going to console or res.json that data. So since we're only getting one item, I'm just going to be doing to-do, then rows, and then the first item. So let's see how that's going to work for us. I'm going to specify 2, and if I click enter, I am going to get the second data. Let's just test for the third one. All right, cool. So that was pretty quick. We made already 3 routes, and the next 2 we're going to work on is update. So update is probably the one that's most unique, but it's really not as complex as you think it is. So we're just going to be doing app.put since we're going to be updating data, and I'm going to say /to-do, to-dos, and then I have to specify the ID because I want to update a specific to-do. Then I'm going to do async request.res. And then, seems like I'm about to lose some battery, so let me plug in my computer really quick. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to do try catch. I'm going to say error, so console.error, error.message. All right. And then what we're going to do next is that not only do we need to get the request.body, but we also need to have the request.params. Why? Because first of all, we need to specify where we want to update the information. And the second one, why we need the request.body is because we're going to update the information with the new description that's being given to us. So let me demonstrate. So the first thing we need is that we need to ID from request.params. And we need to have that description from request.body. And this is what we're going to be using for our queries. So I'm going to say const update to do, and then I'm going to say await pull that query select all. Oh, sorry, it's not select all. It is update into. Okay, so we're going to be update into what table? We're going to be updating inside the to do table. And then what we're going to do next is that we're going to say set. So set description. The column that we want to update, and then we want to set it to the new value, which is going to be $1. Okay, so that's going to represent this later. And then we also need to specify where we want to update that to do. So we're going to put the where clause inside there. And then I'm going to say where the to-do ID equals to, and I hope you can guess this, it's going to be $2. Okay? So you can have as much variables as you want, and you can just specify everything as long as you put $sign and the amount of variables that you have. Next, our second argument is going to be array. So this first item is representing description, so I'm going to put description right there. And then I want to specify the ID, so I'm going to put ID right there. So you can see that the first item correlates with the first $sign, and the second item correlates with the second $sign. Okay? So pretty simple. And just to make our life a little easier, I'm just going to do res.json that the to-do was updated. Okay? So let's kind of test this out again. So I want to make a put request, and I want to update this into, I want to wash my dogs, for example. And now if I click enter, syntax into, update into to do, oops, sorry. You don't need the into. Totally forgot that that's going to be inside for this one instead. Okay, so yeah, forget about that part. That was my bad. So now if you click enter, now it should work. So now to do is updated, and we can check inside here. You know what? Let's just use our RESTful APIs to do the trick. So now I can actually, oops, I don't want to update it again. So let's get that data. And you can see that it says need to wash my dogs. So you can see I made a mistake here, but essentially all you have to do to update information is use the update command. You have to specify the table, and then you have to use set command to describe what type of column you want to change to what. And then you have to specify where it's going to be located at. All right, so that's good. And then our final one is that we're going to be using our delete routes. So this one is probably the easiest one. It's similar to select. We're going to be using app.delete because we need to delete something, to-dos, IDs, and then I'm going to use async request.res, and then I'm going to use a try catch statement, error, console.error, error.message, and then what I'm going to do is I need to at least get the request.params because I need to specify the to-do that I need to delete. So I'm going to say const ID equals to request.params, and then I'm going to say const delete to do equals to await pull that query. Oh no, what is that? Okay, pull that query, and then I'm going to say delete from to do. So I'm using delete from and have to specify the table, and then finally I just have to say where it's located at. So I'm going to use the where clause again. I'm going to say where to do ID equals to $1, and then of course I have to take that ID from there. All right, and then all we have to do is just say res.json to do was deleted. So let's see how this is going to work. So now I want to delete number 3. So if I click enter, you can see to do was deleted, and let's make sure that it is. So I'm going to get every item now. And indeed, number 3 was deleted. So nice. We officially created a RESTful API that's going to be consumed by our React application. So in the next section, I'm just going to give you guys a little quick review so you can have a better understanding of what we just did. I think this is a great time to do a quick review of what we just did. So the first thing we did was create a server, and then we had to create a database. So we created a file called database.sql, which essentially was going to take in all the commands that we were going to be putting inside our command lines. Now you don't have to do this. You can actually directly make it inside here, but I just thought this will make it a little bit more visually pleasing. So in order to create a database, you actually unsurprisingly have to use the command create database and specify the name. And then we have to create a table inside that database. So we use the create table. We have to specify what the table name was going to be, in this case to do. And then we had to define a schema of what it was going to look like, because you don't want to put anything inside your database. So in this case, we had to do ID, which was basically what was going to be using to uniquely identify the specific item in that table. And that's why we use primary key, because this indicates that this is going to be our unique item to distinguish from the other items. And then we use serial, which was going to automatically increment the number whenever a new value comes in to ensure that we don't have any duplicates. So remember how we didn't have to specify 1, 2, and how these things increase? That's because of serial. And then next we had description, which we actually put a varchar of 255, which is the max amount of characters we can put into description. Okay, so pretty simple. And the next thing we did is that we had to connect our database with our server. So in db.js, we required that library, and then we used pool equals to new pool. We instanced that pool right there. And then we configured what exactly where and how you were going to connect to the database. So in this case, I used Postgres as my user. I specified the password that I used when I installed it. I said host is localhost. And the reason I said that was because this machine's running on our local machine. Then I used database PERN stack because that's what we created. And then I put port number 5432 because that's what Postgres runs by default. And I like to emphasize again that your password may not be KTHL8822. It's the password you use when you installed your application or when you install Postgres. And then we just have to do module.export pool. So now I'm going to take in that pool inside my index.js. And then I'm going to put inside my routes. So easy peasy. So the first thing we learned was actually, creating a data. So anytime you want to create something, you want to use the insert into command. And then you have to specify the table along with the column that you want to add value into. So in this case, we have description. And then we wanted to set the value of that description to that variable. And this variable equals to this description right here. So remember that anytime we have $1, it's just simply a variable. And if we were to add another value into our to-do, let's say we want to set the priority of it, then that means I will have to set a $2 as well. And then I will have to specify it inside priority. All right? So hopefully that makes sense. And then finally, we have a returning star because if we want to see the data, we will have to actually use returning star anytime we insert or update or delete data. So for example, as you can see here, if I just simply took this command and I really pre-made it, you can see that I says insert 01. But if I want to actually see the data, I will have to use returning star, and now I can see the data that's being inserted. Okay, and also you can see the numbers are being incremented due to serial. Okay, next, what we did was we updated the information. So we actually needed a little bit more with this one. We needed the specify ID. We also needed the description. So what we did is we used the update command. We specify the table, and then we use the set command by describing the specific column we want to change it to this value, which is from the request.body. And then we also have to specify where it was located at, which was $2. So like I said, this is going to be description, which is representing $1, and the second item the array is going to represent $2. And then we just had to rest that JSON that data. And finally, deleting, which is still pretty easy. All we had to do was delete from command, specify the table, and then we just had to specify where it was located at. So really that's all it takes to building a RESTful API of Postgres. That's just the basic credit application. So in the next application, or in the next section, we're going to start building a React app. Alrighty, so let's start building our client side. So I already pre-downloaded npx create React app client. So it has all my React application. In case you're new to this, essentially what I did was I did npx create React app. And then I had to specify that it was called the client folder. Okay? So before we jump into that, let's kind of see the different components we're going to need. So the thing is that this is our front-end application, and we're going to be splitting it up into 3 components. The first one is going to be the input that we're going to be sending data. The second one is going to be the one that's going to list all of our to-dos. And the third one is our edit button. So keep in mind that when we click edit, we're opening up another modal that's going to let us edit the information. So that's going to be a separate component by itself as well. And also the submit edit, delete button are going to hit a specific route within the server or the RESTful API that we just created. Okay, so let's start doing that really quick. So I'm going to go inside here into my client folder, and I'm just going to do a little bit cleanup because I don't want you guys to see too much. That right here, and I think I should also start this up. So I'm going to say cd the client, and I'm going to do npm start. I'm going to next delete service worker because we don't need that. I'm also going to delete logo, set up tests, and then we're just going to get rid of all the requirements that we need. So in this case, I'm just going to get rid of all of this, and also this. And then I'm going to go to app.js, get rid of that logo we have over here, and just kind of empty it out like this. Okay, and then finally, what we're going to be using, it's Bootstrap 4 to make our development process faster. So I'm just going to go out here really quick. I'm going to open up Bootstrap 4, CDN. So we can go inside here, and all we really need, well, actually we need everything. So I'm just going to go right here, and I'm going to take in this data right here, go into my index.html. I'm going to put it on the top. If you want to, you can get rid of all these comments because they're not going to do us any good. We're just trying to clean this up a little bit. And then finally, what we need is that we need to get that scripts because we're going to use a modal. So I'm just going to put this in the bottom right here. Okay. All right, so we're all ready to go to start doing our React application. So I'll see you in the next section, and we're going to start building some components. All right, so let's start building some components. And to really ensure that there's no confusion, I'm going to split these sections into 3 parts, depending on the components I'm working on. So if you're confused with a specific component, you can just kind of go back in the bookmark to check it out. Okay. So first things first, what we're going to do is create a folder that's going to be called components. And essentially, this is going to represent our 3 components that I just talked about. So I'm going to create a new file that's going to be called input-todo.js. And I think I can call this file list-todos.js. So this input is going to represent this. This list is going to represent this one. And the last one, I'll just call it edit-todo.js. And it's going to represent the edit button with the modal. All right, so let's go inside our input to do because that's the first one I want to work with. So import React from React, so some basic things. And then we're going to make a simple component. So input to do, and then I'm just going to make a functional component. So I'm going to return a simple h1 tag that's going to say input to do. And then I'm just going to do export default. Input to do, and then I'm just going to take it in our app.js. Okay, so I'm going to import that. So I think it's called import input to do from, and we're going to do /components/input to do. All right, and I'm also going to take a fragment as well, just to make sure everything is all together. I'm going to take this thing out. And then I'm going to put our input component that we just recently made inside there as well. So let's check this thing out. So it doesn't seem to be appearing, maybe because it's still compiling. There it is. Okay. And I think it'll look a little bit better if we actually decide to put and I think I'll just get rid of this because it's kind of distracting, but I want to put a container right there to make it a little bit cleaner. Going to put inside here to add some spacing. So let's see how that looks like. Okay, so everything's working well, and let's just continue working on this input to do. So the input to do is going to take in a few things, but let's first kind of require some stuff we need from React. First one is going to be a fragment, and then we're going to be using React hooks, so we're going to use the useState. I'm going to put my fragment right here. Alrighty, I'm going to take my h1 and I'm going to stuff it inside there. And keep in mind that we're going to be sending data, so I need a form tag. Get rid of all of this. And then in our form tag, we're going to have a simple input with a type of text, and then a placeholder that's going to be saying add to do. And then I'm going to have a button, which is going to say submit. Or, you know what? Let's just say add. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, not too bad. And let's kind of design this. So anytime you want to design a form input with Bootstrap, all you have to do is form control, and it should make it look nice. That looks good to me. And for my button, I'm just going to say class name equals to btn success. And you're already seeing that it's not putting it on the same line. So for us to do that, I'm just going to add a class name of dflex. And I think that should do the trick. And then we'll just work on the title right here by adding a class name of text center. And then we're going to say margin Y 5. Because I want to add some spacing from the top to the bottom. And that looks pretty good. Okay? So now all we have to do is start making this functional with our RESTful API. So I am going to use that useState. So anytime you're going to be using the useState, you have to first specify your actual state, which in this case is going to be description. And then we have to set something called set description. And the only way to change the state is by using this thing right here, which you're about to see pretty soon. And then useState is there for us to just specify the default value, which is going to be nothing. So ensuring that our input is put together, I'm going to set a value of description. Alrighty. So for example, if I said hi, it's going to put that default hi inside there. Okay. But I want to be able to change the value as well. So I'm going to say unchange, and I'm going to say E, standing for events, and I'm going to use the set description. So whatever I write, it's going to focus on the value of what I put in the input. So it's going to target that, and it's going to get the value. And I could just console.log this thing so you can see that I'm doing some changes to it. Description. Uh-oh. Okay, so I'm going to open up my console so you can see what I'm trying to do. If I can open my console. So if I write something, look at that. So data is coming down and it's putting it inside the state. Okay, cool. So we have something that's set up. Now we want to submit the button and make a fetch request. So I'm going to go to my form and I'm going to trigger this with the onSubmit. So when this form is submitted, I want to run this function. So onSubmit form. And it's going to throw us an error because we haven't created that function yet. So I'm going to do that really quick so we can get rid of that. And I'm going to just make a functional component or a functional. So I'm going to say const onSubmit form. Oops, not that one. And then I'm going to simply do e.prevent default, and I have to put this event inside there because when we click submit, we don't want this thing to refresh. We want it to do all the actions before it does that. Okay, so now it won't refresh. So if I click enter, you'll see that it didn't refresh at all. And next, what we have to do is make a fetch request, which is going to take some time. So we have to add the async right here. And then I'm going to add a try catch. So error is going to be the result of console.error.error.message. All right. And then what I'm going to do inside here is that I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to package this description all together. So I'm going to say const text is going to equal to description. Okay. So this is what I'm going to be sending into the backend. Or, you know, to make it better, I guess I could just call this body. So let's do that really quick. So I'm going to make a really quick fetch request. So I'm going to say await fetch to specify the route that I'm going to hit. So remember, it's going to be localhost 5000 / todos. And we have to specify that this is going to be method-wise. It's going to be a post request. And then we have to define the content type of this thing. So it's going to be headers. So we're going to say content type, and then this is going to be application JSON. So it's just telling us that this is going to be JSON data, and then we're going to put in our body. All right, so that looks pretty good. So let's see if we can even send that data. And I think if we want to make this more clear, I can just simply say const response. And I could just console.log that response to see what we get in return. So hopefully this does work. So let's create a new value. Let's say eat. Add. We get a response. So cool. Oh, well, it's a bad request. So let's kind of look into our server of why there is a problem. So I'm going to look inside my server right here. I'm going to see why, and I immediately see a few things. I think it was there already. So let's kind of look into the top of what the problem is. Unexpected. Yes, of course. Totally forgot about this. I actually need to stringify it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say body is set into JSON. That's stringify. So I have to stringify the data so I can send it as JSON. And I'm going to put it with the body. So that thing should work now. All right. And now let's kind of test this out one more time. Let's see if everything's working. Let's just kind of refresh our server. Okay, so let's get this thing started. I'm going to say eat again, just something simple. And let's see what we get as our response. And indeed, we actually are able to add some data. So we got a status of 200, and we can look inside our database to see whether or not we have it. And we have eat. So cool. So we're able to add data into our to-do list. So in the next section, we are going to start working on the list to-dos. Now, if you're a little still confused about what's happening, you can rewatch the video, but at the end, I'm going to do a quick recap of what I did with the components. So I'll see you in the next section. Okay, so awesome. We were able to create a search that's, well, not search, but an input that's going to send data by simply getting the items or getting the data from the client side, putting it in a description, and then sending that data to our RESTful API so it can save it in the database. So next, we're going to list all our to-dos since we have quite a few already. So I'm going to go into my list to-dos, and I'm just going to follow the same exact structure. I'm going to say import React from React, and then I'm going to say const list to-dos. And I'm just going to have a simple h1 tag for now. That's going to say list to-dos. And I'm going to say export default list to-dos. All right, cool. And I'm just going to simply put this in our app.js. So I'm going to import that list to-dos from /components/list to-dos. And I'll just put it right under here. And let's see if it pops up. All right. Cool. Okay, so we have it right here. So let's kind of start building this thing. So I want to display all these to-dos inside a table. So I already have it all set up, but essentially what I did is that I researched Bootstrap for tables. You can just simply research it like this, and you'll find it as the first link. So what I did was that I just looked at one of the examples, and I just kind of took some code. So in this case, all I really need is this. So I just need a table. So you can do the same thing as what I'm doing. And then I'm going to require a few things inside this component. I need a fragment. I also need a use state along with a use effect because we are going to get some data. So inside here, I'm going to make a quick fragment. And then I'm going to put my table inside there. So let's look inside a React application, see what's going on. Looks not bad. And I'm going to add a margin top of 5 inside here, so we can add some spacing to this thing. Okay, cool. And I'm just going to change some of this data right here. So this is going to actually be the description. This one right here is going to be where the edit is going to happen. Right here is going to be where the delete button is going to be at. And we do not need these data. So I'm just going to simply create a comment right here. Oops, I don't know what I just did. So I'm going to do this. And I'm going to take one of these guys so I can reference it when I'm going to spit out my data. And I'm going to put this away right there. And I just immediately noticed that I got rid of the T body. So let me just create that again. And everything should start working again. Okay, cool. So what we need to do next is that we need to use the use effect to get data with that RESTful API where we get all the to-dos. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go into the top and I'm going to be using use effect. And use effect basically runs anytime the component is rendered. And the interesting thing about use effect is that it keeps running. So it's going to make multiple requests. So ensuring that we only make one request, I'm going to add a bracket. And then inside here, I'm going to have a function that's going to be called getTodos. And this is what I'm going to be calling. So it's going to throw an error because I don't have it yet. So let's make that really quick. So async, because it's going to take some time. Function, getTodos. What I'm going to do is that I need to get the response. So I'm going to say const response is going to equal to await fetch. By default, fetch makes a get request, so I can just say http//localhost 5000/todos. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to console.log the res. And also I want to keep in mind that the thing is that we're going to get back JSON data, so we need to parse it. So I'm going to say const todos arrays, and I'm going to do res.json to parse the data. And then I'm going to console.log what it equals to. So let's check this thing out really quick. So if we refresh it, oops, totally forgot that it takes some time to parse. So we have to add an await right there. So when we refresh it, you'll see that we got data. So pretty neat. So we got all our data here, and all we have to do is put it inside a state. So let's make our state really quick. I'm going to say const, and I'm going to call this todos. And in order for me to get there, I have to say set todos. To set the values, I'm going to have a default of an empty array. Okay? And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put set todos, and I'm going to put inside that item. So that's going to be to-do array. All right? And just to show you that we have it inside our state now, I can just do console.log todos, which is from this state right there. So let's check this out, and voila, look, we have our state full of these to-dos. And all we have to do next is just map it out inside our table. So I'm going to take that state right there. I'm going to say, what was it called again? To-dos. And I'm going to say, oh, and also if you want to do JavaScript logic, you have to put in brackets. So todos.map, each item is going to represent a to-do, and I'm going to structure it as tr. So remember, it's going to look exactly like this. So the td is going to be to-do dot description, and then what we're going to put in these to-dos is going to be edit. We're going to change these later, so we don't have to put too much inside here. So I'm just going to say delete. Just to keep it even, I'm just going to add e. All right, so now if we look inside our to-do, you'll see that we display all our information. So quite neat. So in the next section, what we're going to be doing next is we're going to make the edit button and the delete button. And we'll be done for application. So I'll see you in the next section. Awesome, so we were able to display all our items. So I think the next thing I should work is deleting the buttons. That one shouldn't be too bad. So I'm going to go right down here, and I'm going to make this a button. So I'm just going to call this button, and I'm going to put it as delete. And since buttons that delete are quite dangerous, I am going to add a class name of btn and btn danger. Okay, so that should make it look a little bit more better. Okay, nice. And what I want to do is that when I click on this, I want to run a function that's going to send a request to RESTful API to delete that. Now, as you can see right here, we already have a little tiny error right there, and it just means that we have to put a unique key. So I'll just do that really quick. So I'm going to set a key of to-do, and remember we have a unique identifier, so we have to do ID. that we just created in RESTful API. So that should make it calm a little bit. And we're going to be using the same exact idea with our buttons. Because remember, when we look into our RESTful API, let me see if we can get it up really quick. Remember down here, when we try to delete something, what we need to specify is the ID. So we're going to actually take the ID and we're going to put it in our onClick. So you'll see later what I'm talking about. So I'm going to say onClick. And I'm going to say after that, when this thing is going to be clicked, I want it to run the delete to-do function. And I'm going to put as an argument the to-do.to-do ID. Okay, so of course we're going to get thrown an error because we don't have that function yet, but we're going to make that right now. So this is getting a tiny bit messy, so I'm just going to clean it up with some comments by saying delete to-do function. What I'm going to do next is that I'm going to create that function. So we're going to call it async function, and it's going to be delete to-dos. Nice. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to try to hit that delete. So I'm going to say try catch to make sure that everything works. Console.error, error.message. And then inside here, I'm going to say await fetch. We're going to say http://localhost 5000/todos, and then we have to specify the ID. So this is kind of where we're going to start using template engines, and essentially what that does is that it allows us to add variables inside our string. So I'm going to put in that ID that I got as the argument from there. And then I have to specify that this is going to be a method of delete. So I'm going to put in delete. Alright. And then just to ensure that everything's working so far so good, I'm just going to say const equals to that, and we can just console.log the rest to see what we get as a response. So now, if I go inside here, and I decide to click delete, let's hope this works, we have a status of 200, so let's see if we refresh this. Nice, so we are able to delete the data. And we'll just try one more time, just to double check. And hello should be gone. Awesome. Okay. But the thing is that I don't want to keep refreshing it, or I don't really want to do window.location again. So what I'm going to try to do is use the filter to just automatically just take it out. So I'm going to use that set to-dos right there. So set to-dos, then I'm going to do a filter, or I'm just going to put it right here. I'm going to go through all of the state that I have right there, and I'm going to filter it. So remember how I had that ID over there. So I want to be able to return all to-dos, where the to-dos.id, to-dos.to-do ID does not equal to that ID that I just specified. So what does this do? So for example, if I decide to delete these data, it's going to get rid of them. And the reason is because it's going to check the ID that I'm trying to get rid of, and it's going to compare it with the other to-dos. And if so long as the to-dos don't equal to that ID, it's going to be spit out inside our state. Okay, so let's just kind of add some items just to kind of get back into the flow. I do not know what that is. Okay, yeah, so we have finally a delete inside our application. And now what we're going to work on next is the edit button. Nice, on to the edit button. So we're going to first go into that component and just do it as usual. So we're going to do import React from React, and then we're going to do const edit to do. And we're just going to make a basic component, not with brackets. And I'm going to return a h1. That's going to be edit. And then I want to export default this edit to do. So let's go inside my, where is it located at? Let's go inside my list to dos. And remember how we have this little edit button? We're going to replace it with the component. So I'm going to first import that. So import edit to do from /edit to do. Now I can go to this edit button and I can replace it with this component. So hopefully that works out for us. So let's see. Should be extremely big. And indeed, it's super big. So now we're just going to start working on this edit to do right now. So as I specified, we're going to be using a modal. So I just simply researched Bootstrap for modals, and I went into W3 Schools because they have all these cool examples. They already have pre-modal set up for us. So this is perfect for us because I want to click on a button and display the information. So I'm going to be using this. So if you want to get to here, just write Bootstrap for modal W3 Schools, or I can just link you guys to the W3 articles that I used. So I'm just going to copy all of this. So let's take all of this data and let's go back to the edit button. And I'm going to require a few things like fragments and use state because I am going to need to have a state later on. And I'm going to put this to fragment, and then I'm going to paste all of this data. And I can't have HTML comments, so let me get rid of all of this. Alrighty, and I'm going to take away this first one too. And we're going to save that, and I'm just going to change that text to edit. And I think everything's going to look good. So let's go over to our React application, and it should display a button that says edit. So nice, cool. So we have this nice edit button, and just to distinguish it a little bit more, I'm just going to change it to warning. Okay, so let's kind of just change this a little bit. I want to be able to have this called edit. So edit to do, and I want this to have like an input along with the edit button. So I'm going to go inside here, and I'm going to call this edit to do. And then I'm going to go down here and get rid of this modal body and actually put inside an input. So input, not a capitalized I, input type text. And then I'm just going to have a class name of form control just to make it look a little bit better. Okay? And then I finally want to have an edit button. So I'm going to take this right here, put it inside the modal footer, call this edit. And also I want to change this to warning. So now if we look at our edit button, it should look a lot better. There we go. This is starting to look like the final project. Now the thing is that we want this edit button to collect all of the data that's being passed. So we want this to show hero so we know what exactly we're trying to update. So what I'm going to do is go to list to-dos, and remember that we're mapping out all the to-dos and we're passing this to-do for each of the items in the array. So what we can actually do is put to-do and pass this as a prop. So we're going to pass this inside our component. So now I can go to my ed to-do, go to the top, destructure it, and I'll just console.log this so you understand what I'm doing. So now, if you look at my console, what I'm passing into this edit is this thing right here, just a single item to do. And if I added another item like clean room, for example, you can see that each of these rows have their own particular object that's being passed into it. So now what I can do is I can create a state that's going to use this description. So I'm going to say const, let's call it description. So this is the description, and then we have set description. And then I'm going to say use state. And by default, I'm not going to set it empty because I want to update this information. So I'm going to take the default value as to-do.description. Okay, so if this is a little confusing, I'll show you what I mean. So if I go into that input that I just created, and I set the value to that state that I have called description, and I refresh it, now look at this. If I click on the edit button, it'll say hero, which I still don't know why I wrote that, but anyway, you can see the text are now starting to be shown. But there is something that's a little bit strange, because if you X out of this and you click on this one also has hero. So the reason why is because the way how a modal works is that it's triggered by a button. So if a button's being clicked, it is actually locating a specific ID. But in this case, this ID is the same exact as this ID right here. So their targets are exactly the same. So we want to make sure that this thing is going to be unique. And the best way to make sure that each modal and buttons are unique and are able to distinguish each other is probably by using the to-do ID. Now, if you know a little bit of CSS, you will understand that you can't use numbers as your ID, so we're going to have to modify it a little bit. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to change the ID to this. So it's going to say ID is going to equal to, for example, it's going to equal to ID and the unique number that we have over there. So I'm going to go inside here, and I'm going to be using some template strings. And I'm going to say ID, and then I'm going to put in todo.todo ID. Okay, and now I want this button to trigger this thing right here. So I'm going to take this right here, and I'm going to change it to exactly like that. So I'm going to have to use the template strings again with a hashtag because I'm trying to get an ID. Then I'm going to say ID with todo.todo ID. So now, if we click on one of these buttons like arrow, we have it right there, and now we should have clean room. So cool. So everything is working pretty well. And I think the next step we should do is wanting to edit this information. So currently right now, we can't type anything inside here. And that's because we haven't worked on the onChange yet. So let's go down to our inputs. And let's go inside here. And I'm going to say onChange. I'm going to change the value to E2. So we have that set description stuff. And I'm going to say E.target.value. So whenever I change the value within this input of the edit button, it is going to edit the information by refreshing. So let's do this. So this is going to be the button that's going to trigger the editing. So I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to do an onClick, and I want it to trigger a function. So in this case, I'm going to call it edit text. Okay. And the thing is I have to be particularly specific on what type of text I want to change. So I also have to pass in a to-do ID. So very similar to deleting. Remember how we had to pass a ID as an argument is because we have to specify for that where clause of what exactly we want to delete or if we want to update. So same thing applies with edit to do. I'm going to go inside there, and I'm going to put in to do and .todo ID. Okay. So now I'm going to make that function because we have an error. I'm going to get rid of this now. So this is going to be edit text. I think I called it that. Edit text, right? Yes, I did. Edit text function. And I'm just going to do const edit text. I'm going to say this is async, and I'm going to set this equal to this function. And also I have to pass in that ID. So I'll put ID inside here, and I'll do a try catch, along with the basic convention of console.error, error.message. All right. So what I'm going to do inside here is I'm going to immediately try to make a request to our RESTful API. So I'm going to say const response so we can see the result we're getting back. Await fetch, and I'm going to say HTTP //localhost. So if you remember the route, it was actually to-dos. And then we had to specify the ID, so I have to actually make this template strings now. And now I can call this ID. And this is not enough because it doesn't know whether or not this is going to be a put request, so we have to specify some more arguments of the method is going to be put. And then we have to say that the headers is going to be, and I keep forgetting this, but it's going to be content type. And then it's going to be application/JSON. And finally, we have to put in a body, which we're going to package inside here. So I'm going to go inside here, and what I'm going to do is set const body is going to equal to that data that we're getting from our description. Because remember, they're going to be changing the data in this description state. So this is what we want to pass down. I'm going to put description inside here. And that's pretty much all I have to do. And finally, sorry, that's not all I have to do. I also have to pass that body. So I'm going to say body, and then remember you have to do JSON.stringify, so it takes JSON data, and I'm going to put the body inside there. And to make sure we're getting a good response, I'm just going to console.log res. Okay. So let's test this thing out to see whether or not it does work. So I'm going to say edit, and I'm going to make it something that makes sense. So hello. So if I edit the information, we get a status of 200. That's a great sign. And this should say hello. Awesome. Cool, it works. And now what I'm going to do next is I don't want to keep refreshing the page. So I'm just going to say window location equals to slash. So I'm going to change this one next. Clean room, more like I got clean car. So I'm going to add that information and it should say clean car. So awesome. This is great. So we have a basic credit application, but we're not done yet because there's a bunch of weird cases that's going on. If I were to click edit and I said hello world, and let's say that, I don't want to edit anymore, and I click X, close, or I click outside, if I go back again, it's going to continue to display that. The reason is because this state is constant. It's going to consistently be displayed there until the page is refreshed. So what I have to do is that when I click X, close, or if I click out of the modal, I need to tell that this is going to trigger it to go back to its default value. So let me show you what I mean. So let's go inside here. And let's look at the X button right here. So if I click on this, I want to make sure that the value refreshes. So I'm going to trigger this thing called set description. And what I'm going to do is set it by default back to do description. There we go. So check this out. If I click edit and I said hello world, if I click this button right here, it's going to refresh it back to hello. So if we go back into it, it says back to hello. And we have to apply this for close and clicking outside as well. So let's take this on click, and I'm going to go back up. I'm going to apply to the modal dialog. Oh, sorry, this one right here, actually, the modal. And then I am going to go for the button that's going to close. So hopefully that should clean things up, and I think from there we're pretty much done. So let's click edit. If I say hello world and I click outside, it refreshes it. If I say F and I close, it refreshes it. So yeah, congratulations, you have created a PERN stack to-do list. It's able to add items, you can edit it, you can delete it, you can even read the information. So in the next section, I'm just going to give you guys a quick review of the overall process so you can get the big picture. All right, so let's do a little quick overview of what we did. So you can see right here that we had different components with the inputs along with the listings and the edit button. So I think it'll make it a little bit easier for you guys to understand if I split the server and with the components. So let me just open this thing up really quick and I'll explain to you what exactly we hit and why we did it. Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna look into input to do. So immediately what you start to notice is what we did is that we set a state called description and we changed it with set description. And anytime the person clicked enter, they were going to set that description state into this route. So HTTP localhost 5000 Todos with the method of post. So if we look up right here, you'll see that that is the route that we hit. It was HTTP localhost 5000 /Todos and it was the post request. So what we were doing is that we were setting this body with the description. And remember, we were trying to destructure that description out of the request.body. And then we did this whole entire process of putting the description for this value and adding it into the database. So after that, we did list to-dos. And you can see that right here, what we did is that, I don't think that's the right one. Let me go to list to-dos. Oh, here it is. So we did get to-dos. So we hit this route right here. So we were wanting to get every single to-dos out there. And we got the data and we had to parse it, the JSON data, and then we set this to-do array inside our state. So we can later on loop it to get every single to-dos out, and we can utilize it for separate other components. So in this case, we decided to display our information as a table. So I said to-dos.map, and I displayed it as little rows in each of the tables. So this represents the item or data of to-do that description. And this was being placed inside edit to-do component along with the delete button. So in the edit button right here, you can see that we put inside that to-do inside there so we can utilize its description and its IDs. So let's look at this delete to-do. The reason why I passed an argument inside there is because it was required for this route to work. So let's look at that really quick. So you notice how this is Todos and it needs ID. So we go back to the function. You'll see I said await fetch HTTP localhost 5000 Todos and the ID, and I was going to destructure that ID to see where it's located at, and it was delete right there. Okay, so once we ran that, it automatically deleted the information, and then we used the filter method to automatically filter the state that followed a condition, so it looked like it was being deleted. And then we had this get Todos over here, which, I already went over that. I think the next thing that we did was the update. So let's go over there. And we had this little request that says HTTP localhost 5000 Todos ID with a pull request. So let's look at that next. And you can see that this is what's going to edit information. So we first had to have the ID to specify where it's located at. We needed the description, which is from here, and we set it as the body, to be destructured, and then to be placed inside our database to be updated. So how do we even get this information was because we sent it as a props. Remember, so to do is inside there. And then we automatically set to do that description because we wanted this to have the default value of it. Reason is because we're trying to update the information. So we don't want to start with a clear blank page. And also we went through a little bit of use cases where the modals were opening different types of buttons, or the buttons were opened like the same modal. So what we had to do was define a unique ID for each one of them. But besides that, everything was pretty straightforward. Again, congratulations on building your RESTful APIs. So what I recommend you doing now is really just building this project again, but without watching the tutorials. I find like the best way to build applications is really testing your knowledge to see whether or not you really truly understood it, and just kind of learning by yourself. And if you feel stuck, then you're always open to watching this video again. But anyway, thanks for watching your video, or thanks for watching my videos, and I wish you best of luck in your tutorials or you're building your applications.